The first thing you need to understand about cotton is that it never stops whispering. Stand in a field at harvest time and you'll hear it. Thousands of bolls rustling against each other in the Alabama heat, creating a sound like voices having conversations you can't quite make out. After 12 hours picking in that white sea, your ears start playing tricks. You hear your name called, you hear children laughing, you hear things that aren't there. That's what I told myself anyway. That's what we all told ourselves. But cotton doesn't breathe, and cotton doesn't watch you with eyes like burning coals. My name is Samuel Washington. I'm 94 years old, and my hands still shake when I touch anything white. Been that way for 67 years now, ever since that October afternoon in 1903 when something came hunting in the Caldwell plantation fields outside Decatur, Alabama. 23 pickers went into those fields that morning. 19 came running out before sunset, screaming about something they called the white thang. 4 never came out at all. I was one of the 19. I've spent most of my life wishing I hadn't been. The dead don't have to remember. The dead don't wake up in cold sweats, hearing that silence where sound should be. The dead don't have to carry what I'm about to tell you. But I'm dying now. Doc says my heart's wearing out, and at my age, that's just the way of things. Before I go, someone needs to know what really happened in those cotton fields. Someone needs to know what we saw, what we ran from, what took the others. The official record says 4 field hands died of heat exhaustion during an unusually warm October day. Says their bodies were found scattered through the cotton rows, victims of the merciless Alabama sun. That's a lie. Those men didn't die of heat, and what we found in those fields wasn't scattered by any sun. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start where it started. With the morning of October 14th, 1903, and a feeling in the air that made every one of us want to turn around and go home. The Caldwell plantation stretched across 3,000 acres of prime Alabama bottomland, and in 1903, every acre of it was planted in cotton. White fields as far as you could see, ready for a harvest under an October sky that should have been crisp and clear, but hung over us instead like a wet wool blanket. I was 27 then, been picking cotton since I was tall enough to reach the bolls. Had a wife, Mary, and 2 little girls waiting for me at the end of each day. Picking was hard work, but it was honest work, and a man could make enough during harvest season to keep his family fed through the winter. Most days, anyway. That morning felt different from the moment I stepped into the field. The air was too still. No breeze moving through the cotton plants, no rustle of leaves, just a thick silence that seemed to press down on everything. The other pickers felt it too. I could see it in their faces as we gathered at the field edge, waiting for old Mr. Caldwell to give us our section assignments. There was Thomas Briggs, built like a tree trunk and strong as 2 men, who could pick more cotton in a morning than most men managed in a full day. Sarah Coleman, whose quick fingers moved through the plants like she was playing piano, never missed a boll. The Johnson brothers, Marcus and Isaiah, who worked as a team and could clear a row faster than anyone. Big Jim Crawford, quiet and steady, who'd been picking these fields longer than anyone except old Pete Williams. Pete was the one who spoke what we were all thinking. "Air feels wrong today," he said, mopping his brow with a kerchief. Pete was past 60, had been working cotton fields since before the war. If Pete said something felt wrong, you listened. "Just hot," said Marcus Johnson, but his voice didn't carry much conviction. "Gonna be a scorcher." "Hot's one thing," Pete replied. "This ain't hot, this is something else. Mr. Caldwell assigned us our sections, same as always. The field was divided into long rows running north to south, each picker responsible for clearing their assigned rows before moving on to the next section. I drew rows 12 through 15, right in the heart of the field. We started picking at first light, working our way through the white bolls while the dew was still heavy on the plants. For the first few hours, everything seemed normal enough. The rhythm took over. Pick and drop, the cotton sacks slowly filling as we moved down the rows. But that wrongness in the air never left. If anything, it got stronger as the morning wore on. The first sign of trouble came around 10 o'clock when Sarah Coleman called out from 3 rows over. "Y'all hear that?" We all stopped picking and listened. Nothing but the usual field sounds. Insects buzzing, a crow calling somewhere in the distance, the soft whisper of cotton plants moving in what little breeze there was. "Hear what?" I called back. "Sounded like breathing," Sarah said. "Heavy breathing, like something big trying to catch its breath." Thomas Briggs laughed, but it sounded forced. "Probably just Pete over there working too hard." "Hey now," Pete protested, but he was smiling. The joke broke some of the tension, and we went back to picking. But I'd heard it too, just for a moment, just at the edge of hearing. A deep rhythmic sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, like the field itself was breathing. The cotton stalks in that part of Alabama grew tall, sometimes 6 feet high or more, creating a maze of white and green that blocked your view beyond the next row. Walking through those fields was like moving through a living tunnel. Cotton bolls brushing your shoulders on both sides, the plants so thick you could lose sight of the person picking just 20 feet away. On a normal day, you could always hear the others working, the rustle of plants as they moved through the rows, voices calling back and forth, the sound of cotton hitting the bottom of an empty sack. But as that October morning stretched toward noon, the sounds began to fade. One by one, the voices grew quieter, more distant, until the field fell into a silence that had weight to it, a silence that pressed against your eardrums and made you want to call out just to prove you still had a voice. I was working my way down row 14 when I realized I hadn't heard another human sound in over an hour. That's when I saw the first track. It was pressed deep into the soft dirt between the cotton rows, maybe 15 feet ahead of where I was picking. At first glance, it looked almost human, about the right size for a man's foot anyway. But as I got closer, the wrongness became clear. The toes were too long, too pointed, and there were marks in the dirt that could have been claw marks, gouged deep into the Alabama clay. I knelt down for a better look. The track was fresh, the edges still sharp and clean. Whatever had made it had passed this way recently, maybe within the last hour, and it had been moving on 2 legs, walking upright like a man. I called out to the others, but my voice seemed to die just a few feet from my mouth, swallowed by the thick air and the pressing silence. No one answered. No one seemed to hear me at all. That's when I smelled it. A thick, musky scent that reminded me of wet dog and something else. Something wild and old and wrong. It was faint at first, just a hint on the still air. But it grew stronger as I followed the tracks deeper into the cotton rows. The tracks led east, toward the center of the field, and every few yards there was another print, always the same shape, always pressed deep into the soft earth, and always heading in the same direction, like whatever was making them had a destination in mind. I should have turned back, should have dropped my cotton sack and run for the field edge and never looked back. Every instinct I had was screaming at me to get out of those white rows and into the open air, but I kept following the tracks. I told myself I was looking for the other pickers, making sure they were all right. But the truth was simpler and more frightening. I had to know what was making those prints. The cotton plants grew thicker as I moved toward the center of the field. The rows narrowed until I had to turn sideways to squeeze between the stalks, white bolls brushing my face and arms. The smell grew stronger too, that wild musk that seemed to coat the inside of my nose and throat. That's when I heard the breathing again, deep and slow and rhythmic, like something large trying to stay quiet. It was coming from somewhere ahead of me, past the wall of cotton plants, close enough that I should have been able to see what was making the sound. But there was nothing there. Just endless rows of white cotton stretching away under the gray October sky. I pushed through another wall of plants and found myself in a small clearing where the cotton had been trampled down. The stalks were broken and scattered, white bolls littering the ground like snow. In the center of the clearing was a depression in the earth, roughly circular, about 8 feet across. It looked like something large had been lying there, resting, waiting. The tracks led away from the depression in all directions, crisscrossing the clearing like the thing had been pacing, back and forth, around and around. For hours, maybe. Days. That's when I saw the first piece of cloth. It was caught on a broken cotton stalk at the edge of the clearing. Blue fabric, torn and stained. I recognized it immediately. It was from Isaiah Johnson's work shirt, the one he'd been wearing that morning. My hands were shaking as I untangled the cloth from the plant. The fabric was still damp, and not from dew. It was sticky. Dark stains that could have been mud, but smelled like copper and salt. I called Isaiah's name, then Marcus, then all of them, one by one, my voice getting louder and more desperate, but the field swallowed every sound, gave back nothing but that pressing silence and the smell of something wild and patient. That's when I heard the first scream. It came from somewhere to the north, maybe a quarter mile away, high and sharp and full of terror. A human voice, but twisted into something that barely sounded human at all. Then, another scream, from the east this time, and another from the south. The white Thang was hunting. I dropped the piece of Isaiah's shirt and ran. Not toward the screams, not toward whatever was happening to my friends. I ran away, crashing through the cotton rows, branches tearing at my clothes and face, my heart hammering against my ribs. Behind me, I could hear something moving through the field, not running, walking, taking its time. The steady rustle of cotton plants being pushed aside by something that didn't need to hurry because it knew I had nowhere to go. The breathing was getting closer, deep and measured and patient, like the thing was enjoying itself, like it had been waiting all morning for exactly this moment. I reached the end of my row and burst out into the open space at the field's edge. The sudden brightness of unfiltered sunlight nearly blinded me after hours in the green shadows of the cotton maze. I stumbled, fell, picked myself up, and kept running toward the plantation house. Behind me, at the edge of the field, something white moved between the cotton stalks. Just for a moment, just long enough for me to see its shape. It was tall, taller than any man, and it was watching me run with eyes that caught the afternoon light and threw it back like mirrors, red mirrors. Then it stepped back into the cotton rows and vanished, leaving nothing but the whisper of plants moving in air that should have been still. I made it to the plantation house and pounded on Mr. Caldwell's door until he answered. He took one look at my face and knew something was wrong. "The field," I gasped. "Something in the field took the others." Mr. Caldwell gathered 6 men with rifles, and we went back. By then, it was late afternoon, the sun slanting low through the cotton plants, casting long shadows between the rows. We found Sarah Coleman first. She was sitting upright against a cotton stalk, her picking sack neatly placed beside her. Her eyes were closed, and there was a peaceful expression on her face, like she had simply decided to take a rest in the shade. But Sarah was cold, had been dead for hours, and there wasn't a mark on her body. Thomas Briggs was 2 rows over, lying on his back with his arms folded across his chest. Same peaceful expression, same unnatural cold, same complete absence of any wound or injury that might explain why a strong, healthy man was suddenly dead. We found Marcus Johnson near the center of the field, in that trampled clearing where the tracks crossed and recrossed. He was kneeling, hands folded in his lap, head bowed like he was praying. The peaceful expression was there too, along with the cold that shouldn't have existed on such a warm day. But we never found Isaiah, never found Big Jim Crawford, never found Old Pete Williams or any of the others. They were simply gone, as if they'd never existed at all. The sheriff came out that evening with more men and lanterns. They searched the field until dawn, but found nothing except the 3 bodies and tracks that led nowhere. Tracks that seemed to appear and disappear without pattern or reason. The coroner said heat exhaustion, said the October weather had been unusually warm, and field work was hard on older men like Pete Williams and Big Jim Crawford. Said the missing men had probably wandered off, confused by the heat, and would turn up in a day or 2. They never did. Mr. Caldwell closed those fields for the rest of the harvest season, said it was out of respect for the dead, but I think he knew better. I think he felt the same wrongness in the air that morning that we all felt. The other pickers who made it out alive scattered to plantations across 3 counties, and we didn't talk about what happened. Couldn't talk about it. Who would have believed us? But I knew what I'd seen in those cotton rows. We all did. Something white and patient and wrong had been hunting in those fields. Something that walked on 2 legs when it chose to, but could drop to 4 when it needed speed. Something with eyes like burning glass and breath that came from everywhere and nowhere. Something that could kill without leaving a mark and take the living without leaving a trace. The white Thang had come to Morgan County, Alabama in the autumn of 1903, and I was starting to understand that what happened to us that day was just the beginning. The reports started coming in 3 days later. Mrs. Eliza Henderson, who lived on a farm 2 miles east of the Caldwell place, said something had been prowling around her chicken coop at night. Found 6 hens dead in the morning. No blood, no obvious wounds. Just dead. With that same peaceful expression we'd seen on the cotton pickers. Then it was the Parkers, 5 miles south. Their prize bull, a massive Holstein that could knock down a grown man without trying, found dead in the middle of their pasture. No sign of struggle. No marks on the body. Just that unnatural cold that didn't belong in the October heat. Each report pushed the thing's range a little wider, like it was exploring, learning the territory, taking its time to understand what lived where. And always, the witnesses mentioned the same details: the smell of wet fur and wild spaces, tracks that appeared and vanished without pattern, and something white moving at the edge of vision, never quite seen straight on, never quite gone. I tried to warn people, went to Sheriff Morrison with everything I'd seen in the cotton fields. He listened politely, wrote it all down in his little notebook, and filed it away with the official report that called it heat exhaustion. "Samuel," he said, walking me to the door, "you've been through something traumatic. Sometimes the mind plays tricks when we're scared. Maybe you should talk to Reverend James about what you're feeling." But I wasn't the only one trying to sound the alarm. Mary Hutchins, whose farm sat right in the path of the spreading reports, came to town 3 days after the Parker bull died. She stood in the middle of Main Street at high noon and told anyone who would listen about the thing she'd seen drinking from her well. "Tall as a man but wrong," she said, "white all over like it was made of milk and moonlight, and when it heard me coming, it turned to look at me." She stopped there, hands shaking, unable to finish. "What did you see, Mary?" someone called out. "Eyes," she whispered, "red eyes, and it smiled like it knew something I didn't." Mary Hutchins was found dead in her kitchen 2 nights later, door unlocked, no sign of struggle, sitting in her rocking chair with her knitting in her lap, peaceful as Sunday morning. That's when the panic really started. People began staying indoors after sunset. Farmers brought their livestock into barns and bolted the doors. Children were forbidden to play outside alone, and even the bravest men in the county made sure they were home and locked up tight before full dark. But locks didn't seem to matter to the white Thang. Neither did walls or distance or any of the normal things that keep the world's dangers on the outside. The Kellermans lived in a stone house with thick walls and heavy shutters, found dead in their beds on a Tuesday morning, all 5 of them. Mother, father, 3 children, same peaceful expressions, same impossible cold. The door was still locked from the inside. That's when I made my decision. Couldn't protect my family by pretending this thing wasn't real. Couldn't keep Mary and the girls safe by hoping it would move on to some other county. I loaded everything we owned into our wagon and prepared to leave Alabama altogether. Mary didn't question me. She'd seen the fear in my eyes, heard the tremor in my voice when I talked about that day in the cotton fields. She knew I'd never ask her to abandon everything we'd built unless I had no choice. We planned to leave at first light on October 30th, head north to my brother's place in Tennessee, and start over somewhere the white Thang had never been. But we waited 1 day too long. I was loading the last of our possessions into the wagon when I heard Mary scream from inside the house. Not a surprise scream, not the kind of scream you make when you drop something or see a spider. A scream of pure animal terror. I ran inside and found her standing in the kitchen, both girls pressed against her skirt, all 3 of them staring at the back door. The door was open. I knew I'd locked it, checked it twice before going outside to load the wagon, but it was open now, and there was something standing just outside in the evening shadows, something white and tall and wrong that shouldn't exist but did. The white Thang looked at us through that open doorway, and I saw what Mary Hutchins had seen. Red eyes that caught the lamplight and threw it back. A face that was almost human, but not quite, like someone had carved a man's features from memory and gotten the proportions slightly wrong. It was smiling. Not a cruel smile, not threatening. More like a patient parent watching children who didn't understand a simple lesson yet. "Samuel," it said, and its voice was like wind through cotton fields. "You've been running." It knew my name. Had probably known it from the moment I first saw its tracks in the field 3 weeks earlier. "Please," I said, putting myself between my family and the door. "Take me. Leave them alone." The thing tilted its head, still smiling that patient smile. "Why would I take you? You're not ready." "Not yet." It looked at Mary and the girls, and its expression softened. "But they understand, don't you?" I turned to look at my family. Mary's face had gone slack, peaceful. The terror was fading from her eyes, replaced by something that looked almost like relief. The girls had stopped crying. They were staring at the white Thang with the kind of fascination children usually reserved for circus performers. "Mary," I said, but she didn't seem to hear me. "It's all right, Samuel," she said, her voice dreamy and distant. "It's not here to hurt us. It's here to help us understand." "Understand what?" She looked at me then, and for just a moment, her eyes cleared. For just a moment, she was my Mary again, the woman I'd married and loved and built a life with. "That we don't have to be afraid anymore," she said. "That there's a better place, a quieter place, where nothing hurts and nothing changes and everything is peaceful forever." Then she took the girl's hands and started walking toward the door. "Mary, no!" I grabbed her arm, tried to pull her back, but she was strong, stronger than she'd ever been. She looked at me with those peaceful, dreamy eyes and gently pulled free. "It's time, Samuel. We've been waiting so long." "You haven't been waiting for anything. This thing is making you think these thoughts. It's not real." But even as I said it, I could feel the pull myself, a warmth spreading through my chest, a sense of rightness and inevitability. Part of me wanted to take their hands and walk out that door into whatever peace the white Thang was offering. Part of me wanted to stop fighting and just let go. The thing was still standing in the doorway, still smiling its patient smile, waiting for me to make my choice. "No," I said, and the word came out harder than I expected. "No, you can't have them." I picked up the shotgun from beside the kitchen table. It was loaded with both barrels, ready for the journey north. My hands were shaking as I pointed it at the white Thang's chest. "Let them go." The thing looked at the gun like I was pointing a stick at it, mildly curious but not concerned. "Samuel," Mary said, her voice full of disappointment, "why are you fighting this? We could all be together. We could all be happy." "This isn't happiness. This is death." "What's the difference?" asked my youngest daughter, Lucy. She was only 6 years old, but her voice carried a weight that didn't belong to a child. "What's the difference between being alive and afraid, and being dead and peaceful?" Those weren't her words, couldn't be her words, but they came from her mouth in her sweet little voice, and hearing them nearly broke my heart. The white Thang stepped into the kitchen then, moving with a fluid grace that made my skin crawl. Up close, I could see the details I'd missed in the cotton fields, the skin that looked human but reflected light wrong, like wet marble, the fingers that were too long and ended in points that might have been fingernails or claws, the way it moved without disturbing the air around it, silent as smoke. "You're afraid," it said to me. "You've been afraid your whole life, afraid of being poor, afraid of being hurt, afraid of losing the people you love, afraid of dying alone and forgotten." It was right. Every word was true. "I can take that fear away," it continued. "All of it, forever. No more worrying about tomorrow, no more pain, no more loss, just peace." I felt the shotgun getting heavy in my hands. The warmth in my chest was spreading, making my thoughts slow and comfortable. Mary and the girls were standing beside the white Thang now, all three of them smiling that same peaceful smile. They looked happy. They looked free. Maybe the thing was right. Maybe fear was the problem. Maybe I'd been fighting something that wanted to help us. I started to lower the gun. Then I saw Lucy's doll. It was lying on the floor beside the kitchen table, where she'd dropped it when her mother screamed. A little cloth doll with button eyes and yarn hair that Lucy had carried everywhere for the past 2 years. She'd named it Sarah, after Sarah Coleman, who used to bring her peppermint sticks when she came to visit. Lucy loved that doll more than anything in the world. Would never have left it behind willingly. Would have fought and screamed before walking away without it. But there it was, abandoned on the floor, while my daughter stood beside a thing from the cotton fields and talked about death like it was a gift. The warmth in my chest turned cold. "No," I said again, raising the shotgun. "You're not taking them." The white Thang's smile faltered for the first time. "Samuel, you're making this harder than it needs to be." "Good." I pulled the first trigger. The blast was enormous in the small kitchen, loud enough to make my ears ring. The white thing stumbled backward, more surprised than hurt, and for just a moment, its shape seemed to blur and shift, like it wasn't quite as solid as it pretended to be. Mary and the girls blinked, confusion replacing the dreamy peace in their eyes. "Daddy?" Lucy said, sounding like herself again. "What's happening? Who is that man?" I pulled the second trigger. This time, the white thing screamed, not in pain, in rage. The sound was like wind through a graveyard, like cotton plants tearing, like all the voices of all the things that had died alone in dark places. It looked at me with those red eyes, and the patience was gone. The gentle smile had been replaced by something that showed too many teeth. "You don't understand," it said, and now its voice was different, older, hungrier. "You don't get to choose. No one gets to choose." It reached for Mary with those two long fingers. I threw myself between them, the empty shotgun useless in my hands, but still swinging it like a club. It connected with the thing's arm, and the impact sent shockwaves up to my shoulders, like hitting a tree trunk wrapped in silk. The white thing backhanded me almost casually, and I flew across the kitchen to crash against the wall. Ribs cracked, blood filled my mouth, but I could hear Mary and the girls running toward the front door, and that was worth any amount of pain. The thing turned to follow them, moving with that same fluid grace, but it was different now, hurried. The spell was broken, and it knew its prey was escaping. I forced myself to my feet and followed, every breath a knife in my side. I found them in the front yard. Mary had fallen trying to unhitch the horses from the wagon. The girls were helping her up, all three of them crying and confused, and finally afraid again. The white thing emerged from the house behind me, and in the moonlight, I got my first clear look at what it really was. Not human. Had never been human. The shape was wrong in ways that hurt to look at directly. Too tall, too thin, joints that bent in directions they shouldn't bend. The white skin that had looked like marble was more like scales, or maybe feathers, shifting and flowing as it moved. And the face. God help me, the face was the worst part. Features that were almost familiar, almost comforting, but assembled by something that had never understood what human faces were supposed to convey. It had been hunting us with kindness, killing us with peace, and when that didn't work, it was perfectly willing to try something else. Mary had gotten the horses loose. "Get in the wagon," I shouted. "Now!" We piled into the wagon bed as the white thing came across the yard toward us, no longer walking, no longer pretending to be gentle, moving like the predator it had always been, fast and fluid and hungry. Mary snapped the reins and the horses bolted. They could smell the wrongness too, could sense something behind us that didn't belong in any world they understood. We raced down the dirt road that led to town, the wagon bouncing and swaying, the girls crying in the back. Behind us, I could hear the white thing keeping pace, not running, just walking that same patient walk, knowing it could catch us whenever it chose. But it didn't catch us. Not that night. Maybe it was the shotgun blasts. Maybe it was the fact that we'd broken free of its spell and it needed time to understand what had gone wrong. Maybe it simply decided we weren't worth the effort anymore. Or maybe it knew we were heading straight into town, toward witnesses and questions and complications it didn't want to deal with. Whatever the reason, the sounds of pursuit faded behind us as we reached the outskirts of Decatur. By the time we pulled up in front of Sheriff Morrison's office, there was nothing behind us but empty road and October darkness. The sheriff listened to our story with the same polite skepticism he'd shown before. But this time, Mary was there to back me up, and so were the girls. Hard to dismiss 4 witnesses, especially when 2 of them were children who couldn't have made up the details they described. Morrison organized a posse that went back to our farm at first light. They found the house empty, the back door still standing open, shotgun shells on the kitchen floor. No sign of the white thing, but plenty of those strange tracks in the soft earth around the house, tracks that started at the back door and led away into the woods, growing fainter with each print until they disappeared entirely. That was the last confirmed sighting of the white thing in Morgan County. The mysterious deaths stopped. The reports of something white moving through the countryside ceased. Whatever it was, wherever it had come from, it seemed to have moved on to other hunting grounds. But I knew better. I knew it was still out there, somewhere in the Alabama backwoods, still patient, still hungry, still smiling that terrible smile as it waited for the right moment to start hunting again. We never went back to that farm, left everything behind and headed north to Tennessee just as we'd planned. Started over in a place where cotton didn't grow, and white things in the night were usually just sheet on clotheslines. I never picked cotton again. Couldn't stand the sound of it, the whisper of bowls rustling against each other in the wind. Still can't. Even now, 67 years later, that sound makes my hands shake and my heart race. Mary lived another 30 years before the cancer took her. She never talked about that night in the kitchen, never mentioned the white thang or the way it had made her feel. But sometimes I'd catch her staring out windows after dark, watching the tree line like she was expecting something white to emerge from the shadows. The girls grew up normal, married good men, had children of their own, but neither of them ever lived anywhere with cotton fields nearby, and neither of them could explain why. I'm the last one left who remembers, the last one who knows what really happened in those Alabama cotton fields in October of 1903. Most of the other survivors from the Caldwell plantation are long dead, and those still alive have convinced themselves it was heat stroke and mass hysteria. Easier to believe than the truth. But I remember. I remember the smell of wild spaces and wet fur. I remember the tracks that appeared and vanished without pattern. I remember the way the white thang could kill with kindness, could make death feel like the most reasonable choice in the world. And I remember the way it looked at me in that kitchen, with those red glass eyes full of patience that could last forever. The doctor says I have maybe 2 weeks left. My heart's finally giving out, and at 94, I've had longer than most. Mary's been dead 12 years now, and the girls live too far away to visit often. I'm dying alone in this Tennessee boarding house, just like the white thang said I would all those years ago. But I'm not afraid. Not anymore. I'm telling this story because someone needs to know. Someone needs to remember what happened to Thomas Briggs and Sarah Coleman and Marcus Johnson and all the others. Someone needs to remember that there are things in this world that hunt with smiles and kill with peace. And sometimes the only way to fight them is to choose fear over comfort, choose struggle over surrender, choose the pain of being alive over the peace of being dead. The white thang is still out there. Somewhere in the deep woods of Alabama or Mississippi or wherever the cotton grows thick and white under October skies, still patient, still hungry, still waiting for people who are tired of being afraid. And maybe that's all right. Maybe the world needs things like that to remind us that peace isn't always a gift, that sometimes the hardest fight is the one against our own desire to give up. I don't know. I'm just an old man who survived something he shouldn't have, telling a story nobody will believe. But I lived. My family lived. We ran when we should have run, and we fought when we had to fight, and we made it through to see another morning. That has to count for something. That has to be enough. Make of it what you will.